I mean, we're dealing with, quite frankly, the most important thing for a lot of people's lives, which is their finances.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't approach that with empathy, trust, and the highest degree of care, then anything you're trying to do is going to be dead in the water, not properly received, or really taken into any sort of consideration by people. So I would say the same degree of care that's required for a bridge is required for people's finances. The rent, food, or anything else that's important is on the line.
Welcome to HR Tech Trailblazers. I'm Mark, head of design at Clair. Today, I'm joined by Armin Tabrizi. He has experience in product design leadership at IBM and currently at QuickBooks Workforce. Him and I have been working together for over a year. Today, I want to kind of dig into the design aspect of our partner relationships. So, Armin, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark.
Before we get into all the design stuff, I really want to kind of pull the curtain back a little bit to when you studied engineering. You talked to me about this ring you had on your finger. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about that ring? I thought it was a really interesting story.
Yeah, for sure. It's essentially a ring that is meant to be slightly uncomfortable. And this was due to a really unfortunate bridge collapse in Quebec. I know, not necessarily the most optimistic way to start a conversation, but as the overarching myth and legend of it grows, it's saying that, hey, we took the iron from the bridge that collapsed because it was collapsing due to engineering oversight and not really taking a look at the respective decisions that had to be made properly and with the right degree of care. And we forged these rings to consistently remind individuals, again, back to that discomfort when you're writing, of the responsibility that you do have when you're actually making these decisions.
Wow, that's really fascinating. As a designer myself, I've never had those types of terrible situations, but I imagine as an engineer, you do have to take things seriously like that.
Oh, for sure. But take a look at what we're doing right now, right? We're dealing with, quite frankly, the most important thing for a lot of people's lives, which is their finances.
Yeah.
If you don't approach that with empathy, trust, and the highest degree of care, then anything you're trying to do is going to be dead in the water, not properly received, or really taken into any sort of consideration by people. So I would say the same degree of care that's required for a bridge is required for people's finances. The rent, food, or anything else that's important is on the line.
One of the things I've gotten from you is how seriously you take your craft, how seriously you take design. And I think that also shows in the leadership that I've seen with you and the way that you handle your team and the way you manage down and also manage up. So I would love to hear a little bit more about your leadership principles, because I think you have a really interesting take on that.
So I think one is just kind of a little bit of a journey I've been on in terms of identifying leadership styles. Martin Gutman, I believe, is the name of the individual. He really wrote a good book called Unseen Leaders. He's kind of taking into question and challenging a lot of the preconceived notions that we have, I guess, especially in a North American working culture and style, which is that individuals that are consistently firefighting, individuals that are able to concoct brash stories about how they saved the day, those are ultimately the individuals that are rewarded. And his whole point is, well, let's take a step back. Is that actually good leadership? Essentially, no. And the reason for this is that good leaders are actually able to kind of go ahead and predict chaos beforehand and really give off the sense of calm and boring because they've actually gone ahead, they've thought it through, and they're able to navigate as need be by making sure that the appropriate scenario planning is done rather than let something ignite to a point where, hey, all hands on deck, all-nighters, etc. needs to be conducted. And then we kind of get into the design team principles as well. One, which is a baser instinct to learn. I want to work with individuals that want to consistently better themselves. And I'm not saying, hey, work needs to be the only thing in your life, because obviously balance is needed, but stagnation is not something that's acceptable. Two is embracing the silly. Three, which is deliberate and honest communication. Four, a skill set surpassing just design, which is proved rather prescient, especially in these times. And five, being tip of the spear. There was a old story of a workshop I can kind of get into. Long story short, some individuals needed to figure out a way to cheaply remove the ice buildup. I realize it's a very Canadian story on their power lines. And someone just said, hey, is there a way that we can get a bear to shake a pole? And obviously, no. But what that really inspired was, hey, we just need the power lines to shake. So what actually ended up being cost efficient by the time we took a look into it is, what if we reroute the helicopter routes to go over some of the lines And that actually provides the necessary shaking to kind of go ahead and get rid of that material.
Interesting.
Right? So like, hey, it's a silly concept initially.
Yeah.
But if we go ahead and we actually kind of put a little bit of parameters around it, try and take it seriously, we can get to where we need to go.
Personally, like how I've seen in my career, and then also like throughout like everybody who works at Clair specifically, one of the things that you and I have talked about, and that I talk about even internally with the team, is like they have such a strong ability to grow. And not even like I've always described it as like the ability and willingness to grow. And another word for that is just like hunger.
For sure. No questions about that. And I mean, those are the people that you want to work with.
Okay. So we have we have growth as the instinct. We have the silliness.
Then we have essentially skill set just past design. So, I mean, we're seeing this more and more in terms of the job roles kind of collapsing where, hey, absolutely, we need to be killers at our craft, but what can you do from a development perspective? What can you do from a PM perspective, right? Because you're going to be asked to stretch more and more, and we need to be able to understand what is the business actually trying to accomplish, tangentially figure out how we can kind of transform those requirements into actual designs, and then what can we commit from a front-end perspective, right? And then in terms of the fourth one, which is being the tip of the spear, at least something I really appreciate from a design perspective is making sure that we're positioning ourselves in a way that we can iterate and bring ideas to life so quickly so that we can de-risk certain ideas. Let's bring it to life. Let's bring it to testing. Let's make sure we get some signal. And then lastly, because I really want to highlight this with yourself, is honest and deliberate communication. So I think that's something that I really appreciated in, day one with yourself. You're like, hey, wearing my heart on my sleeve. I'm going to make sure that we are working towards the same goals. This is what I want to accomplish. This is what I'm seeing from you. This is where our interests are aligned. This is where we may have some push and pull. And how do we kind of work through and talk through all that?
Well, I think that's like, so thank you on like the leadership principles. And I think that's a good segue into design specifically. Throughout my conversations with you, I think where you and I have like really aligned is how we view design within, the craft itself, but also within the context of the business and like the impact it can have. So one thing I'm interested from you is, what are some assumptions business leadership often gets wrong about design?
I think the largest perception that we need to kind of overcome as a profession sometimes is that, hey, we're here for aesthetics and to potentially and only position products, projects, features, whatever have you will, in a way that's like orthogonal to business needs.
Yeah.
Right? When in reality, we're accountable across 4 different planes. One is to the business, right? If we're not furthering business goals, then the question becomes, why are we there? Then the second one is the customer. And the customer is kind of split into 2 different aspects, which is, one, are we actually providing you a value, or are we trying to nickel and dime you? Obviously, we want to be in the former so that we have a long, healthy, successful relationship and people can speak positively about what we deliver. And the second part in terms of the customer is, are we shipping a quality product, right? If it's not, at the basic level functioning, that's a huge separate problem. But not only that, but if it's not joyful, if it's not aesthetically pleasing, invoking the emotion that you want to invoke, then, hey, the customer is going to be let down. They're going to look elsewhere and you're not going to have long-term success. Third would be the business unit. How am I dealing with my cross-functional partners, right? Am I setting themselves up for success? Are we working together cohesively so that what we're working on is growing, we can get continued investment and kind of grow the pie? And I know we've chatted about this all the time, but I'm a firm believer in growing the pie rather than trying to cut a larger piece of it out, right? Lastly is my team. How am I furthering their goals? How am I establishing them to kind of get to the next level, learn, and be fulfilled?
Right. And I've always kind of described design around this like Venn diagram, right? It is the users and it's the business, because you have different stakeholders throughout each company, right? And so you can even take that Venn diagram and just like turn it into a spectrum. And rightfully so, there are some that are on the far end of the business spectrum, and that's their job. And then what I tried to caution every design team that I've been in and that I've led is, do not go too far into the other spectrum, because one, you're just not going to get what you want. Yeah. The features that you want to build, the user obsession that you have, that's great. But you also need to position that in a way that is valuable to the business.
designers almost need to pivot on to one end or another end of the spectrum based off of who they're speaking with.
Right.
So sometimes you might have to go all the way in this direction for this particular plane because of who you're speaking with.
Yeah. I would call that adaptability. Know the room you're in.
Absolutely.
Know who's in the room and adapt your message to who's in the room. Right. And by the way, those different rooms, you could have the same goal.
Yeah.
However, if I'm in a room full of product people and designers, right, I might have a much different message than if I'm in a room with leadership. I could still push my design agenda forward that is best for the users in both of those contexts, but the receiver is going to receive the message that they hear. And that's something that I really push for. And I see that obviously you do as well. And I think that's a good segue, another one, into design as a business amplifier. You know, a little context for the audience is I heard you speak at the Design Leadership Summit up here in Toronto a few months ago when there's a lot less snow on the ground. You gave like a really...
You just killed all of the Tourism Toronto advertising.
It's great here. You guys should come. It is wonderful. Great cuisine, great cocktails too. But I think like the theme of that conference was design as a craft. I'm not going to use the terms that were used there, but it's kind of shifting in a different direction. And you and the aforementioned Lenny, you guys had like a really interesting talk on how to position design as a business amplifier, accelerator. Yeah. I would love to hear your perspective on how you kind of lead your team to do that, to show their impact to the business.
First off, by the way, shout out to Preet for even organizing Design Leadership Summit. What we've repeatedly tried to do, it's more along the lines of whether it's mobile design, tools like Figma coming in, LLMs, AI, etc. There will always be a paradigm shift that this profession has to go through, right? And with that being said, it's more in the sense of how do you create principles that are essentially durable for adapting to each particular paradigm shift. And what we started referencing was like the Gartner hype cycle, right? This is going to change everything. It's going to cure cancer. And we're back down to a grounded set of reality. And from there, it really takes off, apologies. But in terms of your initial question, which is how do we kind of showcase our business value, it goes back to those durable 4 components that we kind of had to go ahead and make sure that we're able to transition through every particular paradigm shift, which is 1, business acumen. Do we actually understand why we exist, what we're trying to further? Data acumen. Can we actually quantify what it is that we're pushing forward? Now, I know there is a lot of thoughts on that one, which is data doesn't make a good product. It's not beautiful. We need proper design, intuition, training on the aesthetics, whatever have you will. And I'm not discounting that. That is very true, right? But data is important in the sense that it's more of the common language, lingua franca, whichever term you want to use, that the organization speaks, right? So we have to be able to communicate in a way that the rest of our organization understands. Third would be stakeholder management. Regardless of a paradigm shift, we're always going to work with people. We're social creatures. That's a skill that needs to be had. And then tech acumen. And when we talked about that, we specifically did not want to go with LLMs or AI because the thing is, there's going to be something else in the future, right? So you consistently have to go ahead and learn what is coming up and why it matters, and more importantly, how it impacts you and how you have to adapt and change.
The tendency for us to like want to jump on trends, and especially as designers, we love like the new toy and Figma this thing came out. It's just like, what are the underlying foundations, like those things, like design principles persist through time, through these new trends, and there are disruptors, right? AI is a disruptor. But I think those other 3 are really important, especially getting like the business acumen, the data piece that you talk about, using data as an input. So there is the quantitative data and there's qualitative data. And so I want to kind of like dig in a little bit on like some specific examples. So the way that our partnership and our product kind of works together, one of the key components is ensuring like our product feels very native to your users, right? And so from the beginning, when we first designed Clair as this embedded experience, the one thing we kept going back to is we almost want as far as we can compliantly do, have Clair be invisible within our partner products like QuickBooks, like Workforce. And how we did that was, okay, this is a feature of your product. I want you to talk a little bit about like some considerations that our teams work through to ensure some of that consistency across our products that Clair felt native within the Workforce app.
There's so many fun examples to pick from. And I mean that in a no BS way in any way, shape, or form. So the most simplistic example is how we actually went through the flow with you folks at the beginning. One of the things that we were able to do was truncate certain portions and really cut off the fat in certain parts. So the reason that we appreciated that was just qual data. We took a look at it. Hey, we can go ahead through best practices, through design knowledge, make this much simpler. And we're able to have the outcome that we want achieved, which is a far faster cycle of individuals going through it, right? But I want to get to the fun one, which is ensuring a cohesive look and feel. It's a nice little feedback loop of goodwill in the sense that we want to be showcasing the utmost respect for our customers and making sure that, hey, if this is a service that you need and from an ODP perspective, right, we're treating you with the utmost respect and care. By being able to embed Clair, we're essentially saying, look, we've vetted this partner, they're trusted, you can go ahead and do what you need to do with them. Because otherwise, as we kind of found out through our initial testing is, hey, I'm not familiar with this company. This is a relatively sensitive topic that I got to go through. And I don't know if I can trust them, right? So cool. We're going to extend the credibility. They work with you folks. And the fun part is, now that they've gone through it, they see the benefit, the substantial benefit, might I add. There's very, very strong customer feedback. You're able to actually have that complete perception come back into our respective application, which is by having this in your app, now I'm actually happier. Now I'm more happy with your service. So that little feedback cycle of positivity is something that we continuously want to foster.
I get a little giddy.
Go for it.
When I hear that. When we first like had the vision for the product, part of that vision was, as I mentioned before, like making it feel native. But what does that actually mean? Like we work closely with you guys, like, okay, we want to match your colors. We want to match your typography. We want to match whether if a user's phone is in light mode or dark mode. We don't want them to be in dark mode, then they're sitting in bed and then they switch to Clair and then they're in light mode. We want everything to be a seamless experience. And then when they get to that last screen where they're able to like pull out their money, we want that satisfaction to be associated with you guys. And so that's why I get a little giddy, because that was through some obsessive testing on our end. And to hear it come to fruition like a few years later it's just a joyful moment for me. So
I'm really happy to hear it. I mean, again, I think the simplest way I can put it, it's the initial transition of credibility into joy experience within the application.
Right.
It's kind of the Bill Gates quote, which is the overarching ecosystem needs to provide more benefits than the sum of the partners. Ultimately, that's where you want to get to.
You are just like a library of quotes and books and
I need to go outside. I know. I got to touch some grass.
It's so impressive. Another thing that I've learned about you, which is awesome, is your obsession with data and specifically funnel metrics.
Sure.
Like how you kind of really lean on your team to be responsible for the funnel and for converting at each step of the funnel. I'm interested in some of the, like, if you could talk to like any successful tests that you may have run that have maybe surprised you.
Sure. We were working with a food processor and we were creating some very custom software for them. And one of the things that we noticed within the way that they communicated with one another is they had a very particular or unique name to their organization for what they called a business unit. And we were able to see that, hey, like there's about 16% more activity in the one that actually uses that particular naming convention that they use. And we're like, why is that the case? And they simply just said, you listen to us. I'm able to see that based on the reflection of that wording. So it makes me trust you more.
Interesting.
That was it. Stuff like that, I mean, I find incredibly interesting. And again, it goes back to making sure that we do the due diligence and reflect the customer sentiment in the overarching products that we deliver. But I also wanted to use one in terms of Clair, just because it's really top of mind and it works quite nicely with the boring leadership component. So our teams work together based off of how quickly we can work and the information that we're able to get. We feel pretty comfortable with what we're going to put out as a V1. And from a contextual perspective, I've worked in previous roles where funnel data is really important. It's a skill that I have. Obviously, you working at Clair, that's a skill that you have. What was really interesting in terms of how we worked is we kind of went through the entire experience and said, I think this is going to be a problem area. I think this is going to be a problem area. And these are the respective input metrics and things that I'll be looking out for.
Within the funnel.
Within the funnel.
Gotcha.
To determine where we might need to pivot, how we can iterate, etc. Right? So after we took a look at these items, the part that I really appreciated is when there was ever any semblance of downtime, our teams got to go ahead and work on respective experimentations, right? So they're like, hey, problem area 1, we're just foreseeing just in case this is an issue. We got to do some multi-arm bandit testing, right? And here's the X number of designs that we've created to solve this particular issue, right? So eventually, when thankfully not all of them were problem areas, but a couple were, as we predicted, individuals were essentially able to say, hey, here you go. Could you just build out this test and we'll find the answer?
Right.
I think it's that sort of stuff, right? You're able to de-risk, you're able to get ahead of the issue, and it was fun.
Yeah.
And you're not stressing.
Right. And that, yeah, exactly. It's like, and it also kind of takes pressure off design and product teams, because it's okay, what is going to be perfect for the user? Is it going to be this or this or this or that? It's do it all, right? We should always constantly be testing.
But the other thing, and I love you kind of just touching on it, the other thing that I appreciate about funnel data more so than anything else is it helps reach a diagnosis.
Right.
Because if it's just opinions, right, then who am I to say my opinion's more valid than yours? You kind of get into that point of unhealthy friction. Yeah. But if funnel data is able to explicitly highlight, hey, this is an issue, this is where we need our attention, we can also be more focused.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not, I got to do 300 different things at the same time because I don't know exactly what's going on, versus this is the problem child.
Right. Yeah, you don't need to know the solution. That would be an assumption that I would love to tell leadership is the designers, product, no one needs to know the solution. And we shouldn't be arrogant enough to think we do know the solution. There are some things, of course, but when you're identifying like drop-offs in the funnel, it goes back to 7th grade science class, right? You're labeling a hypothesis or hypotheses. And then now, okay, what are the solutions that can apply to each one of these hypotheses? And let's test each one.
Absolutely. And then this is obviously the precursor to all of this would be making sure we understand the what and the why. Funnel data helps explain the what. What are they actually doing? We got to do a bit of research on our side to figure out why.
That is right there, mixing the quantitative data with the qualitative data, right? Because you can't have only one.
Absolutely. But I mean, on top of that too, like you take a look at the benefits that it has towards your team. Again, the problem areas that we had to solve, it's really cool just being able to define a clear parameter. Yeah. And when the team sees the positive results on your testing, they're like, I solved something, I did something, they get quicker feedback loops, right? So they're not in a wait and wonder position like, am I a bad designer? Did I not listen? What's going on? It's cool. Like we're fixing what's in my control.
Your funnel obsession aside, do you have any other success metrics that you have your team like look out for? So for instance, like one of the things that we look for in Clair is the customer effort score, right? So after a user first goes through the experience, they take their advance for the first time, we're essentially measuring how hard that is for you to do that. And so it's not just that quantitative, we also want to match, like we don't want it to be a slog. And so I'm curious if you have any other like success metrics from a design perspective that you use with your team.
You're going to absolutely hate me on this one just because it's such a cliche designer thing to do. It depends. But I think one of the ones that's really applicable to everything we do, which is time to value. Do we want to put you through 6 hoops and 3 hours of torture before you see any, fruits of your labor?
Right.
Or do you actually want to clearly highlight, hey, thanks for putting in this effort. This is what I'm able to provide you right away.
Right.
And the reason that, quite strongly positioned towards that one is because it's a strong indicator in terms of like minimizing buyer's remorse.
Right. So
you really have a short window of time to make that impression, and it also mitigates like the peak end rule.
And that and the time to value, we obviously measure that too. But I think about you at this behemoth company at Intuit, right? And Intuit has all these products, not just QuickBooks, they have TurboTax, they have Credit Karma, right? And time to value, you can apply that to each one of those products, right? And
but in very different ways.
In very different ways, right? Yeah, exactly. Like whether I'm doing my taxes as a W-2 employee, or I own a business and I'm doing my taxes through there, where I have like a more premium pricing plan, or in Credit Karma, I sign up right away. How fast can I see my credit score? Or on QuickBooks, you have two user types, right? You have the employees and the employers, right? What is the time to value to each? Does this one plan make sense for this employer versus another larger employer?
For sure. And then you start getting over like the 3-hour discussion of what is value. Right? So, I mean, everyone's like, well, I view value this way. I view it this way.
Right.
Okay, well, we got to accommodate, right?
Right. With personas, user types, things like that. Yeah. It's a good place to wrap up. But just to kind of summarize this conversation is design is data and leadership is boring.
Yeah, I mean, that's the gist of it. But I mean, hey, as always, it's been a pleasure working with you. Thank you for having me on.
Likewise. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Mark.